Hey, I want to welcome our viewers to our Kennesaw Happening podcast. And in the studio, we have an old friend, and we've known each other for a number of years. And now we finally actually get to meet in person because we have always met over Zoom. Now, I want to warn you, she has a year of streaming and podcasting. Well, we won't, I don't know if we probably podcasting because we back then it wasn't, we didn't quote unquote call it podcasting. But so I want to introduce you to Savannah Rose Johnson. She's going to introduce herself, who she is, the businesses she's in, and who she serves. And then we're going to jump into the podcast. So Savannah, please tell our viewers.
Yes, thank you so much, Pete. Pete, you're such a dear friend to me, and I'm so grateful to be here and to connect with your audience and just your community. Like he was saying, I'm Savannah Rose Johnson. I do kind of a number of things. I would say primarily I'm a life coach, but I also say I'm a consciousness coach because I'm also in the psychedelic therapy realm. So think ketamine therapy. I also am in the kind of energy workspace, so the kind of hypnosis, Reiki, whatnot. And then I'm also an Ayurvedic nutritionist. And if that wasn't enough, I'm also an author and podcaster. I have my own business.
Nice.
Yes.
Find out so much. Okay,
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, fine. And then right now I'm working on my yoga teacher certification just because I wanted to touch upon like mind, body, spirit, and just have that just the whole thing and the holistic perspective under my belt. So my business is Eclipse Evolution. And I would say I serve a number of folks. I mean, my audience is global at this point, which I feel really fortunate to say. It's very surreal. So I have a lot of listeners out in Germany and Iceland and India and Sweden. And then also just, I would say most of my client base is in the United States. I do have a few folks overseas, but the time zone piece can get a little tricky. But I would say most of my client base is in the United States, just all over. And I work with, I would say primarily young adults and up. So I feel very fortunate to have a nice spectrum of ages because I feel like I can learn from anyone as much as they learn from me. So I learned from my 20-year-olds, I learned from my 60-year-olds. Like it's all a gift. So I'm just really grateful to be here today and to be with my dear friend Pete. It's such a blessing.
Oh yeah, we were so much like the Zoom. We had that Zoom connection, but I think COVID had helped us realize that we need people. It's like that the Zoom is great, but there's nothing better than face to face. So I always knew you had a holistic approach to things. What got you in that journey? What influenced you as you were deciding what to do?
For sure. That's a great question. Yeah, I would say it's something that has always been for me. I've just made it more formal. I think, back when I was a little girl, I had this rock collection and it was all these different colored rocks. And if I had a math test, I would get one rock. If I had a spelling test, I'd get another rock. Or if I had friend drama, I'd get one rock. And then I found this rock collection just a couple years ago, and it was all these different crystals. So people who are maybe more in the energy healing space and Reiki space, crystals are a big part of that world. And so I call myself a day one crystal girl. I didn't even know it. Same thing with yoga. It was just something I did for fun. And now I feel like it's a very big full circle moment for me to become a yoga teacher and just, again, formalize that process. And same thing with nutrition. I think it's just about changing my perspective. Because when I was in the modeling industry, back when I was a teenager, nutrition was a part of that, but it wasn't, I would say, necessarily for anyone's benefit other than like look as skinny as possible. Whereas now I've been able to shift that relationship with food and make it more about self-care and nourishment and healing, and then being able to help other people who maybe have eating disorders or just an unhealthy relationship with food. Just change that narrative and change that experience. So I find it to be something that I've just organically had this path ahead of me. And I say it's a very heart-centered, heart-led, I guess, driver or motivator behind like how I've just continued to proceed down this path. So, but I'm also just like a perpetually curious person like you, Pete.
Yeah.
I feel like I no stone is left unturned. I just love learning. I'm a lifelong learner.
Yep.
And someone said to me the other day when I told them I was now becoming a yoga teacher, they're like, when are you going to stop getting certifications? And who says I have to stop? Like, why not? It's interesting.
Totally agree.
Let's just do it. Why not? So that's just how my philosophy on life also, I think, influences my direction.
Well, it's a solid one. And I just want to let our viewers know, when we met, it's very unusual and I'm on the higher side of life experiences, and you're maybe on the younger side of life experiences, to be able to have a servant heart, because you absolutely, with Kenrod and with Kelly and that foundation, you stepped up to serve. And then Kelly was looking for somebody to help them elevate their communication with their community, and you stepped up there too. So because you don't find that's very unusual. What really is the core of your servant heart?
Oh, thank you, Pete. I appreciate that. I would say, gosh, I don't know. I feel like it's just so connected to my purpose. I feel like, because I feel like I'm on the other end of the pendulum swing, because I feel like there's a lot of turmoil and just hard things that I understand. Oh, Siri. Thanks, Siri. Yeah. She doesn't get it either. I don't get it, Siri. So. Siri
doesn't understand you. Are you surprised?
Yeah. That. She's so rude. I'm just buddy. But yeah, I feel like with the pendulum swing, I feel like I went through such hard stuff when I was little, and I didn't understand why or how or any of that. And it certainly shaped me as a person. And now I feel like as I've gone through my own healing journey and still going through a healing journey, because I feel like it's a lifelong thing, really. Being able to give back and being able to help other people receive clarity or affirmation or validation or just support is a way I think I selfishly make meaning behind what I've gone through. It's like, okay, if I can go through something and help someone feel better and be kind of what I wish I had in that moment, it makes it worth it for me, what I have gone through, if that makes sense. So
yes, it does.
Yeah, I say like it's something that helps me just build meaning about my own life, but also with that build a sense of peace. And then that is a bridge to gratitude about what I've been through. Like I wouldn't change a thing in my life, even the hardest stuff. I'm able to look back and be like, okay, well, it led me to where I am today. And I'm super thrilled and content and grateful for where I am today. Of course, I still have goals,
right? But
to have a sense of peace right here, right now is something that I'm proud of, but also feel inspired to help other people who are in those dark places know that they can get to that place as well. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And it leads me to a follow-up question. So you made a transition. It's real for our viewers that, are working for somebody else. You transition. What was that like when you transitioned to absolutely, you look in the mirror every morning, now it's you. It's not like nobody else is going to be paying you. It's what are you doing now to impact your business? So what was that like the first part of that transition? Because it's a challenging one.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. Hi. Hi. How's it going? Yes.
Got a conversation with twice to do.
You're good.
I've got to go meet Savannah. She is. Oh, she's already here.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to have Bartina on here.
Yeah, we're screwing.
We're live. So yes. So Savannah is answering a nice question. So yeah, we basically were asking Savannah that, when she transitioned from really working for somebody else to her own business, what was that like as far as how you had to start thinking a little differently, or what was that like?
For sure. Yeah, I wish I could say it was easy, but it also wasn't the hardest thing in the world. I think that I had this itch for some time that was what I knew I wanted to do. It was just a matter of building the trust within myself to do it. No one was going to give me permission, and I couldn't wait for that.
Right.
It was really a matter of, do I believe in myself enough to do this? And it was really about taking a step back and seeing what I've accomplished, seeing those soft skills that I have and I possess, like commitment and dedication and persistence, and just those kind of things that I've sure been able to apply in other career spaces and with other businesses. And I'm grateful for everything that I've been able to do with other people. But it also, when it came down to, I mean, it was really this time last year that I really had this awakening and this kind of, I say, like, come to Jesus moment where it just wasn't working for me anymore.
Right.
I was so burnt out. I was very unhealthy. I was so just under so much stress and had so much on my plate, and didn't have any reprieve, didn't have adequate financial compensation to make it make sense either. It was like, why am I doing this? Because I knew at the end of the day, the people I was working for were not losing any sleep, but I was. And it's not my business. And I'm like, if I'm going to lose sleep about anything, it's going to be something that is mine. So that being said, I had to just really have this moment of, there's humility in the process where I had to understand it really is on me. I'm not going to just wake up and have it be done. It really is on me. But also this moment of balancing out that humility with pride, and knowing if I can help run and be essentially a COO of a company with 80 something employees, I think I can handle a one-woman show. And so just allowing myself that time to recognize my strengths. But I would say that's one side of the spectrum. And then I would say the other side of the spectrum is giving myself a lot of grace, because being in that intense state of burnout that I was in a year ago, again, I was lost 30 pounds. I had this stress-induced psoriasis, head to toe, like Dalmatian spots all over. Like my body was physically rejecting the work. I could not physically do it anymore. And having to really wake up and smell the bacon. Not only has that bacon been cooking, it is burnt, it was charred.
Yes.
So just really accepting, like, and honoring and listening to my body of just, I can't do this anymore. So that's what led me to my separation, and just giving myself that grace to go through the transition as slowly as I needed to. And I thought I could stay maybe part-time with that company and do just some work, not all of the stuff, but it just really came down to how I was feeling just being in that space. And I would just feel so anxious driving there. I'd feel anxious being in the building, and felt like I needed a day to recover just for being in that space and that environment and around those people. So I had to really make that hard decision and go through a grieving process. Like, I think grief is kind of my theme for 2023. It was, and I think grief is sometimes misunderstood, where it's not just grieving someone who has passed away. That's certainly part of it, but grieving my security. Because I mean, I was receiving a check every 2 weeks, and that security was something I had to kind of let go of. I still could trust in myself and my abilities, but also just knowing that I had to kind of let go and surrender to the process, but also to just giving myself grief for, or not giving myself grief, letting myself grieve and giving myself grace in that process, with just knowing it's going to be a hard thing, and that I don't have to feel good the whole time, and that I do need those days of rest. I do need those days to cry. And I do need those things that just help me lift my spirits again. So I just was able to, luckily at the same time, launch into my community, just again, where I feel like because of that burnout, work in that environment was my whole world. I had to build a new role for myself and lean on people. So I'm just so grateful for all my female friends and my community around me, my neighbors, my family, that really poured into me during that time, and just would remind me when I was feeling low, like, hey, you got this, you can do this. And also just learning from other people in the process. Like, sure, I was a one-woman show, but I have all these people around me that I admire who are doing something similar and learning from them and taking their advice. And also I would say the people who aren't doing the same thing as me, not taking their advice. Because I think there's such a thing as like taking on other people's fear. I think be careful where you get your advice from. If someone hasn't done something or done what you are trying to do, like how much value does their advice really have? And sometimes if it's like, oh, be careful, or what, I appreciate concern, I do, but also it's like, how helpful is this? Is this hindering me? Is this person keeping me in their fear and their belief system? So just practicing a lot of discernment about like where that support comes from. But yeah, and just I always go back to just giving myself grace, because I couldn't just launch from immediately working 80 hours a week at this company to working 80 hours a week in my company. I had to have some time off. I had to go slow. And a year later now, here we are in December, I'm finally feeling like I'm able to start picking things up and quicken my pace and fill my days with more. It took me that long, like a year essentially. I mean, I had other stuff on my plate as well, but it took me about a year to finally get to this place of grieving and shedding. I would say shedding the beliefs that I picked up when I was in that space of like, what does hard work look like? Like, what is my sense of self-worth if I'm not working all the time? That it was a huge journey within learning who I am without that place as well. But again, I wouldn't change a thing about it. Of course, I went through anger and frustration and sadness, but that's all temporary. And I've come out on the other side, really knowing who I am and not having to have someone feed that to me anymore. It's like I can stand and know and walk in that truth, which I feel just so grateful for.
Well, knowing somebody like we in co-hosting and doing that transition to you hosting, Kenrod, you just on the surface know somebody, and you can have that gut feeling, and I definitely did, because you're genuine, you're sincere, you can feel your heart when you're talking with people. Now, when you explain it into a little bit more of my understanding, I'm going, holy mackerel, because I know, like a lot of us, me included, we don't recognize these things till on the latter part of life. Yeah. So this is exciting that you're coming to this realization so early. But what would you say, like next year? You mentioned the word grieve and shedding this past year. What would be your word that you're thinking about for next year? What would you like to focus on?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I would say my word for this year, I would say it's kind of two words. I would say discernment and embodiment. I think because on top of grieving that job and just transition, even though I was moving into something great, like my own business, I also on top of that was in an unhealthy relationship, was engaged to someone, living with someone, and then ended up breaking off that engagement just 3 months ago. So that's still very frustrating too. And I'm still going through that healing process. I've talked about it a lot on my podcast, which I'm grateful for that platform. But so I would say having like shed a toxic work environment, shed a toxic relationship, and just among a few other things I've had to grieve. I feel like 2024 is the year of me just living my life for myself. Because I feel like for so long I was living my life for work, and then I was living my life for my relationship. And now I finally feel like I have this freedom and this peace to really just get to know myself more, but also invite new things and new experiences and new people into my life. And that's kind of where I come in with discernment of just really advocating for, is this the right fit for me or not? And listening to myself and honoring that. Because I feel like in the past I've been like, well, is this person gonna like be mad at me if I don't do this for them? Or is this person gonna like take their love away if I don't do this? So that's like shedding that kind of stuff and just really advocating for like, what do I want? What do I value? What do I believe in? And what do I desire? And so then that's where I lead to embodiment, is not only being able to discern and have that, I would say just being more conservative with my energy and where it's going, but then also just embodying those things that I do value and really walking in those values. So if I value honesty and integrity and compassion, like what does it look like for me to walk the walk, essentially? And how is that going to change my career? Like right now, I feel like I'm moving from this, I say like like the boss babe, where I have to be like on that grind all the time. Like I'm a boss babe, I'm a woman entrepreneur, and just kind of shifting even that a little bit, where I don't necessarily want to be on my grind. I want to be maybe more in like a softness and more of a state of flow, and be able to have more rest in my day to day. And that doesn't mean I'm working any less hard. It's just I'm working differently and working in a way that makes sense and is sustainable for me. So I think I would say, as I've been grieving a lot this past year, I've been really striving for peace. And I feel like that's something that I'm hearing a lot around me, is like other people are striving for peace and serenity and contentment. And also just where our attention goes sometimes keeps us from achieving that. So that's kind of one of my goals for this upcoming year, is how can I help other people achieve contentment with their life, not feel like they always have to chase the carrot at the end of the stick, but just be okay with where they are now. Because it's when we're okay with where we are now that we can really settle, and our body can even settle and relax. And that naturally and just organically leads us to our next great idea. It's when we're always stressed out and hustling that we stay in that state of survival, and everything that comes from that is just fostering that state of survival. And I don't want to just survive anymore. I want to thrive.
Right.
So what does that look like, and how can I achieve that? And then of course help other people, just lead them to that space and that mindset as well.
Now that's what do you hear that word? You're wise beyond your years. That's what's my thought as I'm listening to you really describe your mindset and your belief system. That's different than what I thought, just in our interaction over that year. So I wanted to ask you, like, when it comes to your own self-awareness, do you have like a time? Do you do it in the morning, in the evening? Is there a time that you reflect and do some of that thought process? Have you discovered anything in that area by transitioning into your new position or new job?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I'm so grateful for. And that's a great question too, Pete. Just now that I have my own business, like just designing what I want my life to look like. 'Cause before I was having to operate under the whims and the schedule and my time. I say I was time poor, where I felt like I didn't have any time for myself, even to just go to basic doctor's appointments. Like I was so neglectful of myself, because my time was just consumed by that world. So now that I have this time to just, if I want to do a meditation class, like allowing myself that time. But to your point, or to your question, Pete, my daily routine, that's something that I've found so just to be so sacred, because I am an anxiety prone person. I feel like that's something that I just have had to accept about myself, but also learn how to care for. And so for me, my mornings, I don't really start interacting with anyone or do anything on social media until probably after around 10 or 11 a.m. Like I wake up relatively early. I would say around like 7:30. But I need those few hours of just being by myself to ground myself, to get connected to my spirit, get connected to my higher power, and just really get connected to my why. And also, if anything comes up with that, being able to journal it out. So I would probably say I start my mornings by listening to worship music. That's just very much like a part of how I want the first thoughts in my mind to be those that connect me to my higher power, because that spiritual, I would say, why is more important than any human thing I'm going to encounter that day. So that's just how I like to start my days. And I have a lot of animals. So I have a dog and 3 cats and 2 frogs. So I would
Whoa, it is a lot. You live on a farm, or is that just? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I usually start my mornings like
Yeah.
just taking care of my babies. So
Yeah.
I wake up with
Yeah.
cats on me and dogs on me and kisses and everything. So I love starting my day with just all that love and those
Yeah.
cuddles. So one of the first things I do is just feed my babies and then take care of my babies. And then once everyone's fed and is able to leave me alone, that's when I'll start kind of like my hygiene process. So like brushing my teeth, washing my face, just those things that help me just take care of my body. And then I cannot stress this enough, breakfast. I think so many people skip breakfast or eat breakfast in the car. And that used to be me. I used to be like I'm just going to munch on this granola bar on my commute. And I've had to just really flip that and actually cook an egg, make oatmeal, make tea, make cacao. I don't really drink coffee much anymore because I don't need anything to keep me wired. I need stuff to just kind of soothe me since I'm already kind of a high energy person. So that being said, so I make my breakfast and then I have this like little, I guess you call it like a cafe or like a bistro by like the window. So I like to just sit there and be near nature. And I forgot to mention, I don't look at my phone until after I've done these things. Like I don't want to infiltrate my mind with emails or text or anything. I don't even entertain that until after I've done this, because again, I just want to stay connected to my spirit. So I'll eat my breakfast, do some journaling, and then I would say, and then that's when I do my Bible study every morning. So again, just the first thing I want to have in my mind is my why and my prayer time and meditation. And then that's when, after I've journaled and gotten kind of my thoughts out or feelings out, I'll cry or whatever I need to do just to be with myself. Then that's when I'm like, okay, now I can embrace my day. And maybe we'll throw in some yoga too if I just need to move my body. And I love this. By this time, it's usually around like 9 or so. So the sun is like no longer rising. It's like right in the sky. And I have these beautiful windows in my living room that are like up high. So the sun is coming in. So like it's right where I put my yoga mat. So I just am in the sun and it's just so divine. Yes. I love it. It just feels so good. And then that's when I'll start to do my day. So hop on my computer or check my messages or do whatever I need to do. So I guess just to answer your question, I would say I'm like a very much like morning person. This is what I need to just get grounded and regulated. And just get my mind right is what I say. And then at the end of the day, I usually like to stop with my phone or TV like about an hour before bed. So I have like no screens an hour before bed. And that's when I do like my skincare and my hair care and just like those physical things. And then I usually like to read as like just something, just like a fun book, just like something that I'm learning, but is also kind of cheeky, just like a fun, entertaining book. And then that's when I'll head to sleep.
Wow, I like that. There's a gentleman, there's 2 things I want to ask you about. You had said, and I like how you described who you listen to. And this gentleman talked about a common word you hear is transparency. And so I think that, and so his share with us was, that's really knowing how to say no to certain people. Because if you grow up as a people pleaser, you're always saying yes. Yeah, no, I totally relate. And so there comes a time when by saying yes to everything, you're consumed by everybody else's priorities. Right. And so he was saying, like, everybody uses transparency, like just tell them, like, hey, you don't look good today. That's not, I have to be truthful. I have to be transparent. He said, no, think of it as you have to use what you said, discernment. And if this person isn't pouring into you, then you have to make that judgment, like, that's not somebody I want to be, around that much. I mean, you don't cut everybody out, but you're exposed to that kind of thinking. So here's my question. When I like what you just said. I mean, that's just like that time, like he also said 3-2-1, 3 hours not eating, 2 hours phone time, and then in the last hour is your reading. Because today's society with phones, we are inundated with a digital brain. So if we're constantly looking at a screen, there's some effects on you. And have you always thought that digital connection with the phone, did you at some point say, I've had enough, I've got to limit it? Was there a time when you transitioned to your own business, or was it well before that? Did you have that kind of thought and idea?
You're so right about all of that, Pete. Yes, it is such a just part of the reality that we live in today, but also I feel grateful for just I would say, lifelong love affair with nature, because I feel like as I've been able to experience nature, and my dad was always taking me on hikes, and I was just always outside. I was that kid. My mom calls me a lipstick tomboy, where I like to dress up, and outside of this space, you'll catch me in the dirt. Like like in the dirt with like the worms and the critters. So I just like to be outside. And again, that sunlight, I'm such a sunshine person. When the sun is up, I'm up. I need it. But to your point, yeah, I would say, I mean, I definitely do appreciate technology. Like I appreciate like my Instagram following and doing my podcast, and I see most of my clients virtually as well. So it is a part of my life, but also I would say, gosh, when was it? It was pre-COVID. Oh yes. Okay. So it was right around the time I wrote my first book, because again, this concept of being time poor, I knew I wanted to write a book. I knew no one was going to make me write a book. But I was like, but I don't have any time. I don't have any time. When am I going to have time? And then I think this is right around when iPhone started to give you a screen time report, where you spent 6 hours on your phone. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is horrendous. So that's when I started to just build awareness around how much time I was really spending on my phone. And then I've set up screen time limits. You can do that in your settings. So it's just 30 minutes of social media a day. That's it.
Whoa,
and
I like that.
So, and of course, like if there's like exceptions like to that, I try not to go over that. Like, but if there's something I need to like post, and I just like yesterday, I was trying to post something and I just couldn't get my video timing right. So I was on there a little longer than I wanted to be. But that being said, once I was able to set boundaries around these things, that again, you don't think about how much time you're spending on while you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. But you're consuming while you're doing that. And then it uses your energy when you're consuming. And so I was like, dang, if I spent an hour writing this book a day and an hour on social media, like maybe I could get somewhere. And then lo and behold, I started to kind of make this, I say like I transferred the addiction, where I was like addicted to my phone, like a lot of young people were and are. But I actually started to use that time doing something that I really cared about. And I say like your attention is your most precious resource. That's like whatever your attention is on, whether it's another person or your phone or something, that's where your life is going. And so I was like, it's just same stuff, different day with social media, I feel like. So it's like all my attention is going into this thing that's really not doing anything for me, except for just taking my attention. So that's when I was able to crank out my book in a couple months, really, because I was like, I'm on summer break. I have all this time. I have all this attention available. And it was that fast. So that's, I would say, again, that was pre-COVID. So before we were inside and just kind of in this virtual world. But that's something I feel very just fortunate that I was able to build that awareness and set those boundaries around that. Because I would say I've been fairly consistent in sustaining those boundaries. And that's another reason why I like to read, because we all want to be entertained. But if I'm just looking at stuff on the internet, it's so much, and a lot of it doesn't really matter. Or it doesn't make you feel good.
Absolutely.
But if I'm picking up a book that I really care about, it's pouring back into me. Or if I'm playing my guitar and singing, it's like maybe I don't have any plans to perform, but it's just something I like. And I'm participating in life. And my attention is going towards something that I'm pouring out and receiving something from it. And so I just feel like how I feel mentally when I'm participating in life is just night and day to when I'm just on my phone for 7 hours. So.
No, that's again, you're wise beyond your years. I hate to repeat that, but that's how I feel when I'm listening to you. And you said something about when you talk about in the morning in your yoga mat, the sunshine coming in. There was a podcast and he was talking about waking up and immediately connecting with the sun. That vitamin D that we hear about comes only from having those moments. Have you been doing what you described, your yoga mat and the sun coming down? Have you been doing that for a while, or what were our viewers like? Just give us a little frame of reference if you could.
Sure, absolutely. I would say I do more of the yoga now, just especially because it's cold outside. But I would say a few years ago, like pre-COVID and whatnot, that's when I had my doggy daycare business when I was in college. And so just getting up and walking dogs in the morning, I think that's when I really fell in love with the morning sunshine. Because I was out, I was in nature, I was with this adorable animal, but it was the sun. And I think that's just when I fell in love with the sun. And as I've been going through this process this year and just redesigning my life, I just kept thinking back to that time in 2019. I just felt like I was so happy then and just achieving and really starting to build without me knowing it, build the ideal life that I wanted. And then I got away from that as just life happens, but just remembering what were those pieces that really stuck out to me during that time. And it was my morning and being in the sun. So that's something that I've started to incorporate more recently, I would say this year, of just making that a part of my regimen, especially now that it's again getting cold and in the winter time when our sun is less, just really waking up and savoring those moments when I can. So I would say it's something that is a little bit, has some roots, but that I'm fully embracing again, and just continue to build upon that.
Wow. I usually tell my golfers, I don't know when I'm talking to a golfer, we can talk for weeks on golf, but I am also intrigued by the wellness journey. And so I really like what you just shared. And we've had a guest, he couldn't, there was a conflict, and he's into hypnosis. So I know you mentioned that earlier. So is that something like you went and decided to get trained in, or did you have some exposure to it? Could you share with our viewers a little bit of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say hypnosis has been a really interesting journey. And when it comes down to just how I've embraced it, I had some exposure to it in the clinical setting first. I never was a part of like stage hypnosis and not like Hollywood hypnosis. I mean, I'd seen stuff in movies and TV shows of like, you're getting sleepy, but
exactly. Yeah, that's my impression. So go ahead. Yeah.
And so that's like, I say, like, before I do any of hypnosis appointments with folks, I'll do that myth busting of like, I'm not going to make you quack like a duck. I'm not going to swing a clock or make you look into a swirl. Like, that's all like the Hollywood version. But I mean, anyway, so I was exposed to it clinically just because I had someone that I was friends with that was becoming a hypnotherapist, and they're like, hey, can I try this on you? And I'm like, sure. And it was a remarkable experience. It was really, really powerful. And that was like a seed that was planted. And then probably a few years later is when I came across, my college boyfriend's mom sent this to me. Because she was very supportive and still is very supportive of my career. And she's like, hey, I think you would find this interesting. And it was called RTT, the Rapid Transformational Therapy, which is combines hypnotherapy with other things like cognitive behavioral therapy and neuro-linguistic programming. So, and at this moment in time, I was still in college. Like, I didn't have like money really. I was just doing my doggy sitting and my babysitting and those kind of things. And so to be able to take on the financial expense was something that was kind of stressing me out. And so when it comes down to, I would say just the leap of faith I had to take of like, you build it, they come kind of attitude, where I was like, this is something that's just really calling to me, something I just really want to do and feel passionate about. And so that's when I just decided to take that leap of faith and just trust that I could work enough and I could, do enough to achieve this thing that I wanted to do. And I'm so glad that I just trusted in the process and did that. Sure enough, it all worked out and I was able to go through the program. And I say I was like the worst hypnosis student because I was really distrusting. I'm like, what's this witchcraft that they're programming in my brain? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
So it took me a little while to just get used to it and work through those beliefs of what I had seen in movies and whatnot. But then when I really started to understand the science behind it, because I'm a science girl, understand the science and then experience the benefits, I was in love. And so, because all hypnosis is a specific just level of brain activity. It's like the state between meditation you might do on your own and dreaming. So it's like this sweet spot. So we go into hypnosis every night on our way to sleep without even knowing it. So that's why I like to, I don't fall asleep with the TV on anymore. I know a lot of people who do that, but you're kind of, without realizing it, putting the TV stuff into your subconscious because you're in that hypnotic state.
Totally agree.
And same thing with that's one of the reasons why when I wake up in the morning, I wake up to worship music because we're kind of in that same state when we're groggy, sleepy. And so I want, if I'm going to have something infiltrating my subconscious, I want to be I'm protective over what that is. Yeah. And I want it to be something that is good and something that I have faith in. So all that to be said, embracing just the science behind what hypnosis is and how it's just this really deep state of mindfulness when our logical, cognitive thinking mind, our ego, some people call it, isn't filtering stuff out. That's kind of quieted, our body is quiet. So that way we can get in touch with that subconscious driver behind a lot of our behavior. And that's what's led me, I would say my work with hypnosis has led me into this work that I do with psychedelics now, because it's that, but to a much more intense degree, I would say, which I feel very blessed to be in that space and be kind of one of the first people in that space formally. So it's been a journey for sure.
No, I've never heard it to have you explain, the middle meditation and dreaming. I've never heard it explained like that. Not that I've really been seeking out, but this gentleman told me he was into hypnosis and I was like, I knew him before that. So I was like, come on. And I loved it. I'm just naturally curious like you are. So now I have a better understanding because you're right about that REM sleep and when I wake up, I try to keep my eyes closed and remember my dreams and it's getting more vivid the more I kind of play with that concept. And even last night, I know exactly what my dreams were. And there's been years that I would never, of course dream, but I never really thought. This gentleman told me keep your eyes closed for a minute or two and recall your dreams. And so to hear you explain that hypnosis, this is exciting. I want to just ask you on the air because then we have it documented. Would you come back and be a guest again? Because I would love to dig deeper into the wellness part of your journey. Because if that's okay, tell our viewers how they can get a hold of you. What would be the information we can give our viewers? Yeah,
for sure. And I'm always happy to come back, Pete. So just don't hesitate to ask. I know you and we can chat for weeks, as you say. So.
Yes, I really love it. Okay.
But yeah, for those of y'all who'd like to get in touch, if you have any questions or just want to check out my podcast or any of my materials, or if you feel like I could be a resource, my website is Eclipse, evolution.com.
Okay.
And so that's where you can find me. So Eclipse, like solar eclipse, evolution.com. So just a little backstory about why I chose that as my LLC is eclipses. They are, I mean, the moon goes in phases. So everything is fluid, it's moving, but it's also like cyclical in some ways. But eclipses kind of historically have been these moments of very just big energy, profound change. Like I know my mom, when she was working in education, she was like, oh, it's a full moon. It's a full moon. There is, and even the moon controls the tides. So just the energy that's connected to eclipses and just big changes. And then that being kind of a big thing. And then evolution, something that is just small changes over time. So kind of like the big and the little changes and how they're both really important. But either way, we're always moving through this current that is life. So that's why I decided to have that as my brand. Thank you. Yeah, so just find me on there, reach out. I'm also on Instagram and whatnot. All that's plugged into my website. So
okay. And then we didn't get a chance to get into your book. Where is your book available?
Yeah, so again, it's all plugged into my website,
Okay.
but you can also just like Google me or also Google me on Amazon. I think everything is available on Amazon, and I want to say Barnes and Noble, and just kind of those main sellers and whatnot. I do have my second book, I think, is exclusively through Amazon because I did the Amazon publishing route, but my first book, which is my poetry book, that's pretty much like through any main distributor. So
I love that because we do Amazon publishing too. And I think it's like a well-kept secret how efficient their publishing arm is. And for authors like yourself to leverage that and recognize that it's more than just getting the books, but writing them and putting them out there. What's the book title that you have on Amazon?
Yeah, so my Amazon book is Wealth and Worth. So it's financial focus for money, power, and finding your purpose. That was my COVID project essentially, because it's something that I feel like, especially for people in my generation and younger generations, they just haven't really had exposure to, I would say, digestible financial literacy, where I feel like so much stuff out there is like, what about your 401k and your Roth IRA? Like those kind of things that eyes will glaze over because it doesn't connect to where they are. Like no 20-year-old is thinking about their retirement.
Exactly.
But money and financial literacy is really important. So I kind of go into like beyond like how to make a budget, but why. It's all about the why and how to use money for you, not just like, oh, I want to have money so I can buy all these things, which is such a message that I think is told through social media. It's
I agree.
That can be a part of it, but also like, how do you take care of yourself and use this to elevate you and others? So that's that book. It's my Wealth and Worth. And then my first book, baby, I say, is my poetry book. So that book is Ghost and Letters.
Awesome, man. I tell you, I love it. And you've really, I think, tapped into our viewers' heart, because I know you did with mine, but give us your last insight, because we always do that, like our guest closes us out. What would you like our viewers to take home today? It's a last thought.
I would say my final piece is like to be a friend to yourself. I think what I'm hearing a lot from folks lately is just everyone is their own worst critic. And I mean, I think it makes sense how we develop that critic, if it's what we've been told, maybe from family members or second grade bullies or whatever it is, like wherever it comes from. And even if we hear it as our voice, a lot of times it's not really who we are. And a lot of times it might sound weird, but that critical voice is protective. It's maybe like, well, if I hurt my feelings, then no one else can hurt my feelings. But just challenge yourself and see if you can let that go. But I would say to do that in a very gentle way. And a story I like to tell people is going back to like post World War II, when there was that island that these people came upon this island and found all these Japanese soldiers 20 years later after the war ended. And they were marooned on this island and still very hypervigilant, still thinking the war was going on. They brought them back to Japan. And they had a really tough time assimilating into the culture and kept having those moments of PTSD and those moments of hypervigilance. But instead of the town telling them, oh, okay, the war's over, like, stop being so dramatic, they embraced them. They treated them with immense amounts of compassion, gave them all medals, threw them a parade, celebrated their loyalty to Japan. So that's kind of how I want you to embrace that inner critic. It has been working overtime. It thinks that the war is still going on, that it still needs to be there to protect you from whether it's rejection or a fear of failure or whatever it is. But it doesn't need to do that anymore. But in letting it relax, it's instead of just trying to push it away or say like, oh, I'm so dumb for thinking that, or I'm not good enough or whatever. It's like, that's just going to keep that soldier, that critic of yours elevated. So just see if you can thank it for being so loyal to you, but also let it know, like, I don't need you anymore. Like, thank you, but also I'm okay. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we want to thank you, Savannah Rose Johnson. This has been a treat to have you come and share with our viewers today. So thanks again for being with us.
Yes, thank you.